Admiral Kervash had commanded warships for over 30 years. He had seen battles that would make younger officers lose their nerve. He had negotiated with hostile species and emerged victorious every time. So when his orders came through to cross into human territory, he barely gave it a second thought. The humans were young. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. They had only been traveling between stars for about 300 years. Most species had been doing it for thousands. The Zethran Empire alone had been exploring space for over 5 millennia. To someone like Kervash, the humans were like children playing at being adults. His fleet consisted of 7 warships. Not a massive force, but more than enough for a simple survey mission. The Empire wanted to establish an observation post near human space. They wanted to watch the humans, study them, maybe learn a few things about this aggressive young species before deciding how to deal with them properly. Kervash sat in his command chair as his fleet approached the boundary. His sensors officer spoke up from her station. "Admiral, we are receiving an automated message from the human boundary network." "What does it say?" "It warns us not to cross. It says we must turn back or face destruction." Kervash laughed. Several of his bridge officers joined in. Destruction? From the humans? The same species that still struggled with basic diplomatic protocols? The same species that had barely explored a fraction of their own region? "Ignore it," Kervash ordered. "These humans think they can intimidate everyone with threats. Continue on our planned course." The fleet crossed the invisible line that marked the edge of human space. Kervash expected protests, maybe a diplomatic message demanding they leave. Instead, another automated warning came through. "Second warning, Admiral. Same message. Noted. Proceed." The fleet moved deeper into human territory. They were searching for a suitable planet to set up their observation equipment. A place where they could monitor human ship movements without being detected. Standard procedure for the Empire. A third warning came. Then a fourth. Then a fifth and sixth. "They are very insistent," the sensors officer noted. "They are very annoying," Kervash replied. "But they are not doing anything except sending messages. Find me that planet. The sooner we establish our post, the sooner we can leave this space." Those were the last words Admiral Kervash ever spoke. 3 days later, the Galactic Council received a disturbing report. The Zethran fleet had vanished. All 7 ships had simply ceased to exist. No distress signals, no emergency beacons, no debris fields, nothing. The Council's deep space monitoring network showed the fleet entering human space clearly. The ships appeared on sensors, moving at standard cruising speed, following a predictable path toward an uninhabited system. Then suddenly they were gone. It was as if someone had reached out and erased them from existence. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Defense Station Gamma, a massive structure that orbited just inside human territory. He was reviewing the incident report with his second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Sullivan. "Confirmed clean sweep," Amy said, reading from her display. The Zethran fleet ignored all 6 warnings. Protocol 7 was activated at 0400 hours. Total engagement time was 7 seconds. No survivors, no escape pods, no signals. Jake nodded slowly. He was a calm man, the kind of officer who never raised his voice or showed much emotion. Some people found that disturbing. Jake found it efficient. "Did they receive the warnings properly?" he asked. "Yes, sir." All 6 warnings were transmitted in standard Zethran language. Translation accuracy confirmed at 99.7%. They received them. They understood them. They chose to ignore them. Log everything. Send the standard report to Earth Command. Make sure the navigation buoys are updated with the latest translation matrices. I want to be absolutely certain that every species in the galaxy can understand our warnings. Already done, sir. The message is clear in 247 languages. Turn back or be destroyed. No exceptions. No negotiations. Jake turned to look at the main display screen. It showed a map of human space, a relatively small region compared to some of the massive empires that dominated the galaxy. But every centimeter of the border was marked with warning beacons. Every entry point had automated defense systems. Every approach vector was monitored. "How many does this make?" Jake asked quietly. "This year, 5 incursions that resulted in defensive action. 43 total over the past 5 years. Most of them turned back after the warnings. Some did not, and the ones that did not," Amy closed the report file, "are no longer a problem, sir." Jake understood what she meant. It was not that he enjoyed this part of his job. He took no pleasure in watching ships get destroyed, but he also understood something that many species in the galaxy did not seem to grasp. Humanity had learned hard lessons about boundaries. They had learned what happened when you let others ignore your warnings. They had paid for those lessons in blood. Never again. That was the promise humanity had made to itself. Never again would they allow others to violate their space. Never again would they negotiate away their safety. Never again would they show weakness to those who mistook diplomacy for cowardice. "What do you think the Council will do?" Amy asked. Jake considered the question. "They will demand answers. They will accuse us of being aggressive. They will say we are too harsh. They will suggest we negotiate compromise, find a peaceful solution. And what will we tell them? We will tell them the truth. We warned the Zethran fleet 6 times. We gave them 60 seconds to turn back. They chose to continue. They chose to ignore our sovereignty. They chose to test our resolve. We simply provided the answer they were looking for." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her since she first joined Defense Station Gamma. "Do you think we are too harsh, sir?" Jake turned to face her. His gray eyes were serious but not unkind. "I think that clarity saves lives. I think that enforcing your boundaries consistently is more humane than negotiating them away case by case. I think that when you make a rule and enforce it every single time without exception, people learn to respect it, and most importantly, I think that the species who turn back after our warnings, who respect our borders, who follow our protocols, they are the ones who prove our system works. And the ones who do not turn back, they prove why we need the system in the first place." Far away from Defense Station Gamma, in the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, emergency meetings were being called. Representatives from dozens of species were gathering to discuss the disappearance of the Zethran fleet. Accusations were being prepared. Demands for explanations were being drafted, but in human space everything remained quiet. The defense platforms continued their eternal watch. The warning beacons continued broadcasting their messages, and the boundaries remained exactly where humanity had drawn them. Clear, enforced, absolute. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with angry voices. Representatives from 46 different species crowded the space, all of them demanding answers. The disappearance of 7 Zethran warships had shaken the entire galaxy. Ships did not just vanish. Fleets did not simply cease to exist. Ambassador Trell of the Vasari Collective called the meeting to order. She was an imposing figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 eyes that could look in different directions simultaneously. Right now, all 4 eyes were focused on the human delegation. "Ambassador Peter Hughes," she began. Her voice translated into standard galactic through the chamber systems. "The Council demands an explanation. The Zethran fleet was last seen entering your territorial space. 3 days later, they have vanished completely. What have you done?" Peter Hughes stood up slowly. He was a tall man with gray hair and the patient expression of someone who had answered difficult questions many times before. He had been humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years. He knew how these meetings worked. "The Zethran fleet violated our clearly marked boundaries," Peter said calmly. "They were warned 6 times through our automated defense network. Each warning was transmitted in their primary language. Each warning gave them clear instructions to turn back. They chose to ignore all 6 warnings. When they refused to leave our space, we defended our territory using appropriate force." The chamber exploded with noise. Species that normally disagreed about everything suddenly found common ground in their shock and outrage. Even the peaceful Kelevans, who had never fought a war in their entire history, looked disturbed. "You destroyed 7 warships?" Trell's voice rose above the others. "An entire fleet? You killed hundreds of Zethran officers and crew?" "We defended our territory," Peter replied, his tone unchanged. "As is our right under Galactic Law, Article 7, Section 12. Any sovereign species may use necessary force to repel hostile intrusion into their space. The Zethran fleet was an unauthorized military presence in human territory. We responded accordingly." A Corvian representative stood up, his scales flushing red with anger. "They were on a survey mission, a peaceful scientific expedition, an unauthorized military survey mission," Peter corrected. 7 warships entering our space without permission is not peaceful. It is an invasion. If the Zethran Empire wanted to conduct surveys near our territory, they could have filed the proper requests. They could have asked for permission. They could have negotiated access. Instead, they chose to simply take what they wanted. Behind Peter, Commander Lisa Grant sat reviewing data on her tablet. She had been part of Earth's defense fleet for 20 years. She had helped write the protocols that now governed human space. She had seen what happened when borders were not enforced. She passed a file to Peter without looking up. Peter glanced at the file and continued. The Council should also be aware that this is the 43rd incursion into human space in the past 5 years. 38 of those incidents were resolved peacefully. The intruding vessels received our warnings and withdrew. No shots were fired. No lives were lost. 5 incidents, including this one, resulted in defensive action because the intruders refused to leave. And those 5 fleets? Trell asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer, are no longer a concern to anyone. The chamber fell silent. The reality of what Peter was saying began to sink in. The humans had not just destroyed the Zethran fleet. They had destroyed 4 other fleets before it. They had been quietly eliminating anyone who crossed their borders for years. An elderly delegate from the Threne Confederacy spoke up, his mandibles clicking slowly. Ambassador Hughes, help us understand. Why such harsh measures? Other species have borders. Other species defend their territory, but none of them respond with such immediate and total destruction. Peter was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less firm. Because we know what happens when boundaries fail. In our own history, we have seen the cost of weakness. We have watched as those who showed mercy were destroyed by those who showed none. We have learned that clear rules consistently enforced save more lives than flexible rules that are negotiated away. But surely there could be room for understanding, another delegate suggested. Room for mistakes, for accidents, for second chances. We give 6 warnings, Peter replied. 6 opportunities to turn back. 6 chances to make the right choice. That is 5 more opportunities than many species give. That is 5 more chances than the Zethran gave to the 17 species they conquered over the past 2,000 years. The chamber was silent again. Peter's words hung in the air. Everyone present knew the history of the Zethran Empire. Everyone knew they had built their civilization on conquest. Lisa Grant stood up to join Peter at the podium. The Council seems to believe that humanity is being aggressive. Let me be clear about something. We are not expanding. We are not conquering. We are not threatening anyone. We simply want to be left alone in our own space. Every ship that enters our territory receives the same warnings. Every captain gets the same opportunities. We do not discriminate. We do not negotiate. We do not make exceptions. Because making exceptions is how borders become meaningless, Peter added. If we let one fleet through because they claimed it was a survey mission, then every fleet would claim to be a survey mission. If we let one empire ignore our warnings because they were powerful, then every powerful empire would ignore our warnings. We learned long ago that consistency is the only thing that works. Trell looked at the human delegation for a long moment. The Council is not satisfied with words, Ambassador Hughes. We need proof. We need transparency. We need to understand how a species barely 3 centuries into space travel can completely destroy fleets that have existed for millennia. What do you propose? Peter asked. A demonstration. Allow Council observers to examine your border defenses. Show us your capabilities. If you refuse, it will be seen as an admission that you are hiding something. That perhaps these ships did not violate your space at all. That perhaps you are simply making them disappear for your own purposes. Peter glanced at Lisa, who gave a small nod. He turned back to Trell and smiled slightly. The Council wants a demonstration. Very well. We will show you exactly how we defend our borders. We will show you our systems, our protocols, and our capabilities. And when we are done, there will be no doubt about what happens to those who ignore our warnings. When can you arrange this? Trell asked. Give us 2 months to prepare. Send your observers to Defense Station Gamma. Captain Jake Morrison will personally oversee the demonstration. I promise you it will be educational. The meeting adjourned with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was about to learn exactly what humanity meant when they said their borders were not negotiable. 2 months later, a Council observation ship arrived at Defense Station Gamma. On board were 12 observers representing 12 different species. They came with recording equipment, analysis tools, and deep skepticism about human claims. Captain Jake Morrison met them at the docking bay. He shook hands and various appendages with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything. Some of the observers found his composure unsettling. How could someone be so calm when discussing the destruction of entire fleets? "Welcome to Defense Station Gamma," Jake said, gesturing for them to follow. "I understand you want to see how we maintain our borders." The lead observer was a Threen named Qualix. His species were known for their analytical minds and thorough approach to problem-solving. He clicked his mandibles together in what his translator rendered as polite acknowledgement. "We want to understand how your species destroys military vessels so completely. We want to know what weapons you use. We want to see proof that these ships actually violated your territory as you claim." "Fair enough," Jake replied. "Let me give you a tour first. Then we will get to the interesting part." He led them through the station. They passed through crew quarters, medical facilities, recreation areas. Everything looked remarkably ordinary. The technology was advanced but not revolutionary. Nothing suggested the capability to wipe out entire fleets. They visited the sensor control room, where Lieutenant Amy Sullivan showed them the monitoring systems. The displays showed hundreds of ships moving through nearby space, all of them carefully tracked and identified. "This is how we watch the borders," Amy explained. "Every ship within 10 light years is cataloged. We know their type, their speed, their heading, and their identity. The moment any ship approaches our boundary, we begin tracking it more closely. And if it crosses the boundary," asked a Sullivan observer, "then the automated systems take over." Qualix looked around the control room. "I see sensors and displays. I see monitoring equipment. I do not see weapons." "That is because the weapons are not here," Jake said. "Would you like to see them now?" He brought them to an observation deck that looked out into space. The view was breathtaking. Stars stretched away in every direction, beautiful and peaceful. "What you are looking at," Jake said quietly, "is approximately 50,000 automated defense platforms scattered throughout this sector. Each platform is about the size of your shuttle. They are self-sustaining, powered by solar collection and internal reactors. They are controlled by artificial intelligence systems that operate independently once activated." Amy pulled up a holographic display. Suddenly, the empty space filled with tiny red dots. There were so many that they formed a cloud, a web of defensive positions that covered everything. "They are everywhere," Amy continued, "cloaked so normal sensors cannot detect them, silent so they emit no signals, patient because they can wait for centuries if needed. The moment any ship crosses our boundary without authorization, every platform within range locks onto that ship." "How many platforms are there in total?" Qualix asked, his voice quieter now. "Throughout all of human space? Approximately 800 million. We have been building them for 70 years. We add more every month. By the time someone could map our defensive positions, those positions would have changed." The observers looked at each other. 800 million automated weapons platforms. The number was staggering. "What happens when a platform locks onto a target?" asked the Corvian observer. Jake nodded to Amy, who brought up a recording. "This is from the Zethrin incident. I will show you exactly what happened." The hologram showed 7 Zethrin warships moving through space. They looked powerful, confident. Then text began appearing on the display. "First warning transmitted," Amy narrated. "Clear message in Zethrin language. Turn back immediately or face destruction. The fleet continues without slowing. Second warning. Third warning. Fourth warning. Fifth warning. Sixth warning." All transmitted over the course of 60 seconds. The ships in the recording continued forward. They showed no sign of stopping or changing course. "At this point," Amy said, "the defensive protocols activate automatically. No human involvement is required. The platforms make the decision based on clear parameters. The target was warned 6 times. The target did not leave. The target is now designated as hostile." The hologram suddenly filled with streaks of light. They came from every direction, converging on the Zethrin ships like a closing fist. The fleet's shields flared as they tried to absorb the impacts. It made no difference. The first ship came apart in less than 3 seconds. The others followed in rapid succession. Within 7 seconds, all 7 vessels had been reduced to debris. "The platforms use kinetic weapons," Jake explained. "Tungsten rods accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Simple physics. Mass times velocity equals impact. When several thousand rounds hit a ship simultaneously from multiple angles, shields and armor are irrelevant." "And after the attack?" Qualix asked quietly. "The platforms automatically collect debris larger than 1 cubic meter. They compress it into storage containers. We return these containers to the appropriate government along with a formal apology and complete recordings of the incident." We want there to be no doubt about what happened. The observation deck was silent. The observers stared at the peaceful-looking space outside, now knowing that it was filled with hidden weapons, each one waiting patiently for a target. "You have built a wall," Qualix finally said. "A wall of death around your entire territory." "We have built a clearly marked security perimeter," Jake corrected gently. "Every ship in the galaxy has access to our boundary coordinates. Every species with space travel has been given our communication protocols. The information is public and free. We update it regularly. We make sure everyone can understand our warnings in their own language." "But if someone makes a mistake," the Celavan observer protested. "If a ship has a malfunction, if their navigation fails, if they cross accidentally, then they have 60 seconds to respond to our warnings," Amy said. 60 seconds to send a distress signal. 60 seconds to turn back. 60 seconds to show they do not intend hostility. We have had ships cross accidentally 17 times. All 17 responded to the warnings. All 17 were escorted safely back across the boundary. Some even received repair assistance. The Zethran fleet had working communications, Jake added. They had working engines. They had working sensors. They received every warning. They understood every message. They simply chose to ignore them. That was not an accident. That was a decision. Qualix clicked his mandibles slowly. "Your ambassador said you are not aggressive, but this system seems designed for aggression." "This system is designed for deterrence," Jake replied. "There is a difference. We do not send our fleets into other territories. We do not threaten our neighbors. We do not demand concessions or tribute. We simply enforce our boundaries. Every species knows where those boundaries are. Every species knows what happens if they cross without permission. The choice is entirely theirs. And you feel no remorse?" asked another observer. "No regret for the lives lost?" Jake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious. "I feel regret that some captains choose to test our warnings. I feel regret that some leaders send their people into danger unnecessarily. But I do not regret enforcing our boundaries, because I know what happens when boundaries fail. I know the cost of showing weakness to those who mistake diplomacy for cowardice." He turned to face the observers directly. "You came here wanting to understand how we destroy fleets so completely. Now you know. Simple technology applied consistently. Clear warnings given repeatedly, and the absolute certainty that we will do exactly what we promise. That certainty is what keeps the peace. That certainty is what makes most ships turn back. And that certainty is why, despite what you might think, our system saves lives rather than costs them." The observers returned to their ship later that day. They had seen everything they came to see. They had their recordings, their data, their proof. As they departed from Defense Station Gamma, Jake watched their ship carefully navigate back across the boundary, following the approved corridor exactly. "They understand now," Amy said quietly. "Some of them do," Jake replied. "The others will learn soon enough." News of the demonstration spread through the Galactic Council quickly. The recordings were shared, analyzed, and debated. Some species expressed new respect for human determination. Others worried about the implications of such absolute defense. A few saw it as a challenge. General Vex Corvin was one of those few. He was the supreme commander of the Corvin Supremacy's military forces. His species believed in strength above all else. They believed that power gave rights. They believed that the strong should take what they wanted and the weak should accept it. The idea that humans, barely 3 centuries into space, could dictate terms to anyone offended him deeply. He made his announcement public, broadcasting it through official council channels. The Corvin Third Fleet, consisting of 300 warships, would conduct training exercises that included passage through human space. They would not stop. They would not ask permission. They would not acknowledge human authority over the region. "We will demonstrate," General Vex declared, "that human borders mean nothing to those with the power to ignore them. We will show the galaxy that automated defense platforms cannot stand against a determined force. We will prove that humanity's reputation is built on fear, rather than capability." The Galactic Council immediately tried to intervene. Ambassadors from a dozen species contacted both the Corvin Supremacy and Earth, urging negotiation. The Corvins ignored them. The humans, through Ambassador Peter Hughes, declined to negotiate. "General Vex is welcome to attempt his exercise," Peter stated in an official communication. "We will respond according to our established protocols. The outcome will be the same as it has always been. General Vex laughed when he heard the response. 300 warships against automated platforms? The humans were either bluffing or deluded. His fleet represented one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They had conquered star systems. They had won wars against species far more advanced than humanity. A few million automated weapons would be nothing. Colonel Danny Pierce watched the Corvin fleet approach from his command ship, the Vigilant. He was only 34 years old, younger than most officers of his rank. But he had earned his position through combat experience during the border wars, the decade of conflict that had convinced humanity to adopt its current defensive strategy. They are not slowing down, his tactical officer reported. Lieutenant Kevin Hart was equally young, equally experienced. The defense fleet had learned to value competence over age. Did not think they would, Danny replied calmly. How many platforms do we have in range? Approximately 200,000 and growing. More platforms are coming online every second as they advance. By the time they reach maximum range, we will have over 300,000 locked on. Warning status? First warning transmitted. Standard message in Corvin primary language. Translation verified. No response from the fleet. Danny settled back in his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked quietly and efficiently. Everyone knew their jobs. Everyone knew what was coming. Kevin, make sure all recording systems are active. External observers, internal logs, everything. I want complete documentation of this incident. Already done, sir. We have 17 different recording systems running. Multiple angles, multiple frequencies. Even if they somehow damage some of our platforms, we will have clear records. The Corvin fleet crossed the boundary at full military speed. Their formation was tight and professional, 300 ships moving as one, a display of coordination and power that should have intimidated anyone watching. Second warning transmitted, Kevin reported. No response. Third warning, no response. Fourth warning. No response. Danny watched the tactical display. The Corvin ships showed no sign of slowing, no indication they were receiving the warnings. But he knew they were. The communications were being sent on every channel, in every format. The Corvins were getting the messages. They were just ignoring them. Fifth warning, no response. Sixth warning, no response. Platforms activated, another officer announced. Targeting solutions locked. Awaiting final confirmation from command. Danny took a slow breath. 300 ships, thousands of crew members, all of them about to die because their general wanted to prove a point. He felt the weight of it, the responsibility, but he also knew what would happen if he showed mercy now. If he let this fleet pass without consequence, every aggressive species in the galaxy would see it as weakness. They would come testing human borders, seeing how far they could push before humanity pushed back. Clear rules, consistently enforced. That was the only thing that worked. Execute Protocol 7, Danny ordered. For exactly 8 seconds, space around the Corvin fleet blazed with light. 200,000 tungsten rods, each one accelerated to incredible velocity, converged from every direction. The Corvin shields, designed to handle energy weapons and absorb explosions, might as well have been paper against kinetic impacts moving at relativistic speeds. The first ships disintegrated almost instantly. Their shields flared and failed. Their armor crumpled. Their hulls came apart under forces they were never designed to withstand. The rest followed in a cascade of destruction that lit up the darkness like a sudden sunrise. When the light faded, there was nothing left but expanding clouds of debris. 300 ships reduced to fragments in less time than it took to read a status report. Kevin's voice broke the silence on the bridge. All targets destroyed. No survivors detected. No escape pods launched. Debris collection protocols activated. Danny closed his eyes briefly. Log everything. Send full reports to Earth Command and the Galactic Council. Include all recordings from first warning to final cleanup. I want complete transparency on this. Sir, another officer spoke up hesitantly. The Council is going to be very upset about this. The Council is always upset, Danny replied. Let them be upset. We followed our protocols exactly. We gave the warnings. We waited the full 60 seconds. The Corvin fleet made their choice. We simply provided the result. Hours later, the recordings reached the Galactic Council. The response was immediate and intense. Some species demanded sanctions against humanity. Others called for military intervention. A few suggested quarantining human space entirely, but an equal number pointed out what Ambassador Peter had been saying all along. The humans had warned the Corvan fleet 6 times. The warnings were clear, translated properly, impossible to miss. General Vex had publicly announced his intention to ignore human authority. The fleet had crossed the boundary deliberately, knowing full well what would happen. The debate raged for days, but slowly a consensus began to form, not because species agreed with human methods, not because they liked the harsh enforcement, but because they could not deny the simple truth. Humanity had made their rules clear. Humanity had enforced those rules consistently, and humanity had given every chance for the situation to be resolved peacefully. The Corvans had chosen war. The humans had simply finished it quickly. General Vex Corvan, watching from his command center far from the incident, stared at the recordings in disbelief. 300 ships, his best fleet, gone in 8 seconds. He had been so certain that human defenses would fail against superior numbers. He had been so sure that his fleet's power would be enough. He had been wrong. And 300 ships' worth of officers and crew had paid the price for his arrogance. For the first time in his long military career, General Vex understood what it meant to face an enemy that did not bluff, did not negotiate, and did not back down. He understood why other species had started respecting human boundaries. He understood that humanity's reputation was not built on fear, it was built on certainty. The destruction of the Corvan Third Fleet changed everything. It was the single largest military loss in recorded Galactic Council history. 300 ships destroyed in 8 seconds. Not through superior tactics or brilliant strategy, simply through clear warnings ignored and consequences delivered. The Council convened again 3 weeks later. This time the chamber was not filled with angry voices. Instead, a heavy silence hung over the assembly. Representatives who had been demanding action against humanity now sat quietly. Even the most aggressive species seemed subdued. Ambassador Peter Hughes stood before them, his expression grave but steady. Beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Bennett, head of Human Security Forces, waited to speak. Humanity does not seek conflict, Peter began. We do not wish to be conquerors. We do not desire expansion into other territories. We take no pleasure in what happened to the Corvan fleet, but we will not apologize for defending our borders. Why? Ambassador Trell asked. Her voice was different now, less accusatory and more genuinely curious. Why this absolute stance? Other species have borders. Other species defend their territory, but none enforce them with such finality. Help us understand. Sarah stepped forward. Because we know what happens when borders fail. In our history, we have seen what occurs when one group decides another's sovereignty does not matter. We have witnessed the atrocities that follow when might becomes right. We have experienced the cost of failed deterrence. She activated a display showing images from Earth's past, wars between nations, cities destroyed, people displaced, genocides committed. The darker chapters of human history played out for the Council to see. These are our lessons, Sarah continued quietly. Millions of humans died because someone, somewhere, decided that borders were negotiable. That no meant maybe. That superior force justified intrusion. We learned in blood that clear boundaries consistently enforced are the only thing that prevents larger conflicts. She paused, letting the images fade. Every war in our history started with a small violation. A border crossed, a warning ignored, a challenge unanswered. And every time we tried diplomacy first, tried negotiation, tried compromise, it only delayed the inevitable while making the final conflict worse. Peter took over. Our defensive protocols are harsh, we acknowledge that, but they are also perfectly clear, completely predictable and entirely avoidable. Every ship that has been destroyed in our space had multiple opportunities to turn back. Every captain who died made a conscious choice to ignore our warnings. But what of mercy? Asked a Kelovan delegate. What of compassion? What of understanding that mistakes happen? We give 6 warnings, Peter replied. 6 opportunities to make the right choice. 6 chances to turn back. That is 5 more chances than my ancestors received when their borders were violated by more powerful neighbors. We believe that is mercy. We believe that is compassion. A Threne representative stood up slowly. You speak of your history, but other species also have difficult histories. Other species have also learned hard lessons. Why are humans alone in taking such extreme measures? Sarah answered. Because we are young enough to remember. Because our lessons are recent enough to still feel real. Many species in this chamber have been stable for thousands of years. They have forgotten what it feels like to have sovereignty stripped away. They have forgotten the cost of weakness. We have not forgotten. We cannot afford to forget. The debate continued for 3 full days. Species presented arguments for and against human methods. Some proposed sanctions. Others suggested compromise. A few called for accepting human boundaries as they were. In the end, practical reality won. Humanity controlled their territory absolutely. Attempting to force them to change would require military action that no one wanted to contemplate. The recordings from the Corvin incident had made clear what would happen to any fleet that tried. More importantly, a growing number of council members were starting to understand the human position. Not agree with it necessarily, but understand it. There was something to be said for absolute clarity. Something to be said for rules that never changed, never bent, never made exceptions. The council passed a resolution. Human boundaries would be officially recognized as inviolate. Any ship entering human space without proper authorization would face immediate defensive action. The council would not intervene. The council would not protest. The council would not demand explanations. But in exchange, humanity would continue to provide advance warning, maintain accurate boundary data, and return all debris from defensive actions to the appropriate governments. It was not the outcome many species had wanted, but it was the outcome everyone could accept. 20 years passed. Admiral Jake Morrison, promoted from his position at Defense Station Gamma, now oversaw the entire defensive network. He stood on the observation deck of a new station positioned at the far edge of human space, watching the stars in comfortable silence. Beside him, Captain Amy Sullivan reviewed the latest reports. She had followed Jake through several promotions, eventually taking command of her own station before being reassigned to help establish this new position. "Quiet out here?" she remarked. "Quiet is good," Jake replied. "Quiet means people are learning. It has been 6 years since the last incident, 6 years without a single defensive action. Do you think it will last?" Jake considered the question carefully. "As long as we remain willing to enforce our boundaries, yes. The moment we show weakness, the moment we let someone cross without consequence, it starts again. That is the price of peace. Constant vigilance and the will to act when necessary." Amy nodded slowly. "Sometimes I wonder if we are too harsh." "I used to wonder that too," Jake admitted. "Then I remember what humanity was like before we learned to set clear boundaries. The constant conflicts, the endless testing, the small violations that grew into major wars. Clear rules, clearly enforced, save more lives than they cost." An alert chimed softly on Amy's display. She checked it and smiled. "Transport ship requesting passage through Sector 7. All proper authorization codes. Flight plan filed 3 weeks ago. Expected cargo manifest matches our records perfectly. Grant them passage. Assign an escort to guide them through the approved corridor. And Amy, send them a welcome message. Let them know we appreciate proper protocol." Amy sent the authorizations. Within minutes, the transport began its journey. Through human space following the designated route exactly, a small human escort ship stayed with them. Not as a threat, but as a guide, ensuring nothing went wrong. Jake watched the transport's progress on the display. This was how it should work. Clear rules, proper procedures, mutual respect. The transport would pass through safely, deliver its cargo, and leave without incident. Both sides would benefit. "Do you remember the early days?" Amy asked quietly. "When every week brought a new challenge? When species were constantly testing our boundaries?" "I remember," Jake said. "I remember thinking we would be fighting forever, that no one would ever learn, that we would spend our entire lives destroying fleets. But they did learn. Eventually. The hard way, unfortunately. But they learned." He turned to face her. That is the thing about absolute consistency. People test it once, maybe twice, but after they see that the rules never change, that the consequences are always the same, they stop testing. They accept the reality and adapt to it. Even the aggressive species, especially the aggressive species, they respect strength. They understand certainty. What they do not respect is weakness disguised as diplomacy. What they do not understand is rules that change based on who is breaking them. Amy was quiet for a moment, watching the transport continue its safe journey. You know what the strangest thing is? I have been reviewing the diplomatic reports. More species are adopting human-style boundary protocols. Not exactly the same, but similar concepts. Clear warnings, automated defenses, absolute enforcement. Jake smiled slightly. Because it works, because it reduces conflict, because knowing exactly what will happen is better than guessing and getting it wrong. Far across the galaxy, in stations and ships and planetary defense centers, other species were indeed studying human methods. Some adopted parts of the system, others modified it for their own needs. But the core concept spread steadily. Clear boundaries, clear warnings, clear consequences. 20 years since the Corvin incident, human space remained peaceful. Ships requested permission and received it, or were refused and respected the decision. Traders followed approved routes. Diplomats used official channels. And the defense platforms, those 800 million automated sentinels, waited silently in the darkness. They were rarely needed anymore. Most days they simply watched as authorized ships passed through peacefully. But they remained active, remained ready, remained certain in their purpose. Because that certainty, that unwavering commitment to enforcing boundaries, was what kept the peace. Not through fear, as some critics claimed, but through clarity, through predictability, through the knowledge that humanity meant exactly what they said. No one trespassed into human space anymore. Not because they could not, but because they finally understood they should not. And in that understanding, in that acceptance of clear boundaries clearly enforced, humanity had achieved what they wanted from the beginning. Not conquest, not expansion,